The Fahnestock Store, located here at the intersection of Baltimore and Middle Street, was one of the most prominent business enterprises in Gettysburg at the time of the Civil War. Built about 1810, the structure was operated for many years as a tavern. In one early advertisement, it's referred to as the Eagle Tavern. In 1833, Samuel Fahnestock purchased the property, and shortly thereafter, his advertisements appeared in local newspapers. It was originally operated as the Fahnestock Store and then the Fahnestock and Sons Store. And when Samuel retired in 1855, the Fahnestock Brothers Store. The three Fahnestock brothers were James, who lived here on Baltimore Street, Henry, who lived a block further west on Middle Street, and Edward, who lived with his family in this very building. Samuel Fahnestock died in 1861. But his wife, Susan Balker Fahnestock, still lived here with Edward and his family at the time of the battle. Susan's brother was Henry Balker, president of Gettysburg College at the time. A story told in the 1932 history of Gettysburg College related that Susan and Henry's brother, Isaac, was living in Frederick County, Maryland. He had two sons in the Army at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg, one on the northern side and one on the southern side. And supposedly, both nephews visited Susan here at the time of the Civil War. One unusual feature of the building was an observatory platform that had been built atop the roof of the building. At the time of the Civil War, Daniel Alexander Skelly was employed as a clerk at the Fahnestock Brothers dry goods store. Much of the morning of July 1st, he stood atop Seminary Ridge west of the town with other townspeople watching the opening of the battle. When the fighting escalated and it became too hot to remain at his vantage point, he came into town. According to Skelly, being anxious to see more of the battle, he concluded to go to the roof where an observatory platform afforded a fine view of the countryside. The observatory, quote, was on the back of the building fronting on West Middle Street. There were steps from the third story floor up to the roof of the building, the exit being through a trap door. The observatory had a railing and benches around it, and it was about 8 feet or more square. Accompanying Skelly to the rooftop observatory were his friends Isaac L. Johns and Augustus Bentley, along with Louisa Tate Fahnestock, who resided in the building at the time. Louisa was the wife of Edward G. Fahnestock, who at the time of the battle was stationed in Suffolk, Virginia as a lieutenant colonel of the 165th Pennsylvania Drafted Militia. So here we are on the top of the Fahnestock building, very near the site of the observatory in July of 1863. We are fortunate that we have 3 different accounts of the events that occurred in this observatory. One by Daniel Skelly, which was related in his narrative of the battle in 1932. A newspaper article that was written by Augustus Bentley in 1885. And of course we have General Oliver Otis Howard's personal account of the events up here. So basically on July 1st, about 10:30 a.m., General Howard, a group of his aides, came riding down Baltimore Street, and apparently they tried to get into the cupola of the Adams County Courthouse, which is located very near us. The people in the observatory here, they noticed General Howard. They conversed with some of the staff officers. Dan Skelly went down to General Howard, and they brought General Howard and one of his aides to the top of the building. According to the accounts, they had a map, they had a sort of a telescope, and they looked at the area west and north of the town. They could see some of the battle action and the smoke on the other side of Seminary Ridge from this location. You can look out and see the Lutheran Theological Seminary building. While they were watching the action west of the town, a courier came down the street and announced that General Reynolds had been wounded in the battle. General Howard was shocked. and told the courier that he hoped that the general would be all right. A few minutes later, another courier came down the street and announced that General Reynolds had died and that General Howard was now in command of the Union troops on the field. He immediately turned to his German aide and told him to ride to General Steinwehr and actually occupy Cemetery Hill with his division south of the town. So it was here on this roof that General Howard assumed command of the Union troops on July 1st, 1863.
Skelly, like many civilians, knew nothing about the battle, and more specifically was very curious if their side was winning. So imagine standing atop this roof, watching the smoke coming from the Seminary Ridge over there. Imagine the tension building, knowing the battle is coming towards you. The battle would eventually force Skelly to leave the rooftop for his own safety and go into a neighbor's cellar. His account represents for us the fear and the want to know more by many civilians and the whereabouts of their friends and family. According to Skelly, when the Confederates occupied this portion of town, they kept a clam-like silence on all matters concerning the battle. The civilian experience is often pushed aside when we think about the Battle of Gettysburg, but it's important to understand how little they knew about the battle at the time. One could only imagine the suspense. They quite literally had no idea what was going on. They saw their homes ransacked, abandoned, and even used as hospitals and soldiers' outposts during the battle. Skelly gives us a vivid rendition of anxiously awaiting at a window every night above in the Fahnestock Store. Imagine it's night, it's very dark, broken up by the sounds of cannon fire and muskets, but the sounds of battle are muffled, and otherwise the night is painfully silent. Skelly was sleeping in a room in the Fahnestock Store just above the street below, and there were Confederate soldiers below the window, and he recorded the following. But we were to remain ignorant of what the great conflict of the day would bring to us, who were still in enemy hands. I went to bed restless. About midnight, I was awakened by the commotion down the street. I went to the window and saw Confederate officers passing through the lines of Confederate soldiers. Very soon, the whole line disappeared, but we had to remain quietly in our homes. I went back to bed, but was unable to sleep. We would remain quietly at the window, trying to catch the conversation of the Confederate soldiers who were lying at the pavement below the window. We were eager to catch something, but we did not learn very much from them. So the civilian experience that Skelly represents for us is incredibly unique. So imagine even more broadly, other civilians who may have even had to host enemy soldiers within their homes. They had to watch these people march into their town, and you heard the fighting, and maybe you had a friend or family even in the battle. They took your food, they took your homes, and you knew nothing of what was going on at the time. And the civilian experience is often clouded and confused, and it's full of a lot of different complexities and irregularities, but it shows us an entirely different perspective on the battle in one of the most important battles in American history. It is an average perspective, but yet many offer important insights into the stories of extreme heroism in a time of extreme societal change and pressure. In 1886, Daniel Skelly became a partner of the Fahnestock Store with Ferdinand Warner. This store lasted until 1911, and Skelly passed away in 1932.
According to Daniel Skelly, it was between 10 and 11 o'clock when General Howard and the group were here on top of the observatory. And he said he knew that because of the clock on the courthouse next to this building. In 1902, General Howard returned to Gettysburg for the dedication ceremony of the equestrian statue to Henry Warner Slocum, and he accompanied Daniel Skelly to the observatory once more, and they had their image recorded on top of this building.